I can see you like the ocean breezes.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to pretend there's a secret place in Canada that nobody knows about, except for a few special Canadians. But yes, I don't currently live in front of the ocean, but it does make a nice, relaxing background. A little more so than my basement where I'm currently recording. So
That's okay. All right, let's get going. I'd
yeah, by
like
all
to
means.
I'd like to welcome you, Jonathan, to Declares to Light for Life. It's about life, sharing your experience, strength, and hope. And as we discussed, about you share your experience, strength in the journey of your life. Coach John is a weight loss coach and an emotional eating expert who lost 100 pounds, from nanotechnology researcher to Navy Marine engineer to globetrotting nomad. Coach John spent most of his life running from his true calling until one question changed his life. Now he's on a mission to help others lose weight for good and leave BS diets in the rearview mirror. With freedom nutritional coaching, he marries the science of metabolism with the psychology of behavior change and the compassion of human connection to create life-changing transformations for his clients. Nice
Uh,
introduction.
well, thank
I
you.
want to
Yeah.
give a little introduction of who I am. 15 years ago, I was 494 pounds.
Wow.
I dropped 360 pounds, and as far as that was concerned, I'm a size 6 now. And so I understand the journey of weight loss, and it
Yeah.
took me 5 years to lose it. And interesting, I've got a book in the works on weight loss myself. So it just I got 4 other books I've written too on different subjects. So um,
Fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, you know, it's great that you share your journey. And I just thought give you something that I do understand where you're coming from. And I use different tools, 12-step groups. I use, different folks in my life, and I surround myself with positive people. And I think we all have to. So
Yeah, absolutely.
how about you, start with the journey of when you were younger, you were your age, 0 to 10 years old. Why don't you
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
share about that?
Well, I have kind of an interesting start in life because I was born at 26 weeks. So I was 14 weeks premature, meaning that I basically missed the entire third trimester of pregnancy. And so I wasn't really actually expected to survive, but thankfully the quick thinking of my dad. So I was born at home. When I came out, my dad did CPR with his pinky finger and unplugged my nose and airways using a tiny syringe. And so his quick thinking actions and getting my heart beating and my lungs going probably prevented me from serious brain damage. So I feel like very fortunate in that regard, and I really owe him a lot for that. So that was the early start. I was born in Vancouver, British Columbia, so on the west coast of Canada. So
Been there.
yeah, so that was kind of how things started. I've got a brother and just 2 siblings. So really, first 10 years of life, I would say were relatively uneventful. I'm fortunate because I come from 2 parents who are married, happily married. They've been together for now. It'll be 43 years, and
Oh,
so that really provided quite a stable home life growing up. Both my parents, they've had their own challenges in their growing up years, but together, they really presented a stable, loving home for us to grow up in, and that really, I think, laid a foundation for me able to navigate some of the future experiences that I was going to go through. So I felt really grateful for that.
as a child, what were some of those things you had to navigate?
Well, it wasn't so much that I had to navigate. Well, as a child, I just I dealt with temper tantrums. So looking back, I understand that I'm an empath and I experienced like big emotions. But as a child, I didn't really know what I was experiencing, and I think the temper tantrums were just kind of like things would build up to a certain point, and all of a sudden, all of this emotion had to come out in one way or another, and that's how it would come out. It was kind of like a pressure relief valve, and so I think my parents they did the best they could to navigate this, and they did a pretty good job. So again, I'm really grateful to them for what they did and how they guided me through this. So if ever I was subject to discipline, my parents, it was never I never wondered why it was. there was always that took the time to explain to me, first of all, here's what, here's the behavior that's a problem. Here's why we don't want you to do it. If you do it again, there'll probably be some form of repercussion. Consider yourself warned, and I was the type to kind of push boundaries. And so usually if they said that, I had to figure out if they really meant it or not. And I would, push the boundaries a little bit. And so kind of depending on the severity of what it was that I did, it could just mean taking away some privileges or spending time in my room or something like that, But at the end of the day, after I'd sort of paid my little penance for whatever sort of misbehavior had occurred, I'd come out and I'd have to say I was sorry to them. They'd say, we forgive you and we love you. And so even when I was subject to discipline, like I never wondered if my parents loved me. And I think, again, that was extremely important in terms of helping to shape who I am. That they laid this foundation of, like there are boundaries in life. There are things that if you want to be basically a good citizen of life, ways to behave and ways not to behave. And they really worked to try and help shape those behaviors while still basically allowing me to be a kid.
Going from 10 years on into your teenage years, how would you describe some things you had to go through then, challenges or things you had to overcome? I'm hearing laughter there.
Well, the teen years were kind of awkward. So, I had braces and glasses, and I'm a pretty intelligent guy. So I was a very smart kid, usually performed top of my class academically. And if you go back to the 90s, kids weren't so kind to those, didn't look so kindly on those who were scoring good grades, wore glasses, and had braces. And so that, because when I was 10, we moved from Vancouver to a small town, and so that was kind of a difficult age to sort of shift and try to make new friends and things. And so there was kind of that sort of challenge as well. Just having braces, having glasses, going through puberty, kind of being this taller, gangly kid. I was 6 feet tall by the time I was 13. So I haven't grown much since then. I think I might be 6'1" on a good day. So really kind of navigating those difficult teen years. But I would say as I got into my mid-teens, 15, 16, 17, and got into sports and sort of blossomed in that area, that I started to sort of find my own. Find my own people, my own friends, that kind of thing. And so I'd say sports really played a key role in helping me to find something outside of necessarily just being book smart or academic, to connect with other people and be social.
Discovering sports, being a book kid, as far as that's concerned, how would you say you would combine those two, that, brought you forward?
Well, I think there's real value in being a kid who reads. I look back, and again, I'm grateful. I have a very curious mind, and so I think I read a lot because this is pre-internet, and so I wanted to learn a lot about a lot of things because I was just curious how the world works, and so that was a very good thing. But sports really gave me kind of an outlet where I could get engaged in physical activity, engage my body, kind of really, I think, quite good for mental health, and gave me another sense of purpose. So it turns out I was actually quite good at basketball, and I was also good at coaching other people. So very often I was voted to be captain of the basketball team. That was my primary sport. Volleyball was my secondary sport. And so kind of put me into a position of leadership. I had to sort of work on even my communication skills as like a sort of a young teen leader. And so all that reading, that information was helpful in one sense, but this was helping me to learn how to communicate what I was learning, studying to other people, and learn how to more interact in even a leadership role.
Great. Moving on through your 20s up into maybe age 20, 21, how did things go for you? What did you meet in life? What kind of obstacles or challenges or things? I know that's a very difficult period for a lot of people to maneuver as far as they feel like they can conquer the world. And the world is their oyster and they know everything. So give me a beat on that.
Well, I think When I was 16, I thought I had everything figured out. By the time I was 18, I was starting to come to the understanding that maybe I didn't know everything. And well, as soon as I graduated 18 years old. As soon as I graduated from high school, I moved 6 hours away to Vancouver Island, where I went to University of Victoria, and went straight. So oftentimes people go into college for a year or two and then move into university. And I went directly into university. So that in itself was a challenge because the university campus had 10 times more people than the town I grew up in. So there's just a lot more people. Kind of the good part about it is I could just kind of blend in. Nobody was really bothered about what I was or wasn't doing. I love to rollerblade, so I spent most of my time like between classes on the rollerblades, which kept me fairly fit and athletic. And I had a very busy schedule because I originally started studying music theory and then chemistry. So I thought I was going to go into the world of education, maybe be a high school teacher, and I thought chemistry and music would be like a good combination because maybe I thought that physics was too challenging, biology was too easy, so chemistry seemed like a good middle ground. And then music was kind of another passion of mine, so it was a nice way to balance it out. But ultimately, I ended up moving away from music. I stayed with chemistry, got into sort of math, physics, and actually got into marketing psychology as well. So not sure why. I think I was just kind of interested in how the brain works, and I thought maybe that would give me a little bit of idea of things down the road if I wanted to get into business. But then I actually made the decision once I'd finished my university to join the Navy. And so actually I should take one step back because while I was at university, I worked as a nanotechnology researcher. And so I was working on, I guess, developing blue light emitting nanoparticles in a simplest sense. And so this technology is something that would have been used or we were trying to develop for something that maybe in the future become Blu-ray. But I wasn't, at a certain point in time, I realized that I was kind of being groomed to go into a PhD project. But I realized I didn't want to do my PhD at that point in time. In my, 20, 21-year-old logic, I felt that I would be working for not very much money for somebody else to take credit for the work, to get letters after my name that I felt most people wouldn't even be impressed by. And so I opted out of going into a PhD program and decided instead to join the Navy and take up marine engineering.
Looking at where you're at today and looking back, how would you say things, your background and where you're at prepared you for today?
Well, I think like the military, for example, was a really good thing in one sense, for me as a young man. I think I was drawn to the sense of discipline and order and structure and a lot of kind of basic needs being taken care of. But one of the challenges that I encountered in there is that I was starting to become more vocal and outspoken. I wasn't afraid to voice my opinion. So if I saw something that I felt could be done in a more efficient or a better way, I didn't mind voicing my opinion. However, in doing that, very often I would trigger the ire of my superiors, whether it was superior non-commissioned members or officers. And ultimately, I think that was a valuable learning experience in choosing my words carefully, because that was, despite being a top performing engineer in the country, I was one of the top marine engineers in the country. We had what's called a merit list, and I was ranked top of that for a couple of years. But because of my sort of outspoken nature, that prevented me from getting promoted. And so ultimately, I spent about 6 years total in the Navy. 3 years, had a year away living in Australia, and back and did 3 more years when I was now married to an Australian. And so I think really what I was learning from that was how to maybe choose my words carefully, because I have a fairly quick thinking brain. And sometimes my mouth fires off before I've really given a lot of critical thought to what it is I'm about to share. And so
kind of aim, then shoot.
Yeah. Was it ready, fire, aim?
Yeah, that you got ready, fire, aim. I think you read that book.
Well, I've certainly seen the headline of it anyways. And so I think that was something that I struggled with, was just really because, and we could all really kind of connect this back to being sort of an emotional kid and being a bit of a hothead growing up and so on. So there's this impulsiveness to my nature, but I also have a fairly quick thinking brain. And so the two together sometimes were not really the greatest combination, because I'd open my mouth, I would speak, and it wasn't always that well received.
It sounds like you like to be the leader of the pack and like to be outspoken. I definitely know what you mean, because I don't like to be part of the crowd myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as I sort of found I quite enjoyed being in positions of leadership, not because I wanted to have authority over other people, but um, it kind of gave me a sense of purpose because I feel like there's a real a section of responsibility to leadership as well. So in a position, there's actually kind of more pressure, and I think I kind of was thriving, or I was enjoying sort of feeling the pressure to live up to a certain set of expectations. And so I kind of went from being this shy, goofy kid in my young teens to really enjoying stepping in a position of leadership because I kind of liked the pressure of responsibility.
Okay, let's move on up the ladder. How about 20 to 25? Where were you at then?
We did, and we kind of covered some of that just with the time that I'd spent in the Navy, and so
Okay.
it might be valuable to because I spent a year living in Australia. I'd met my wife a few years earlier, but we just stayed in touch by email. But ultimately, we ended up going back, getting engaged, going back to Australia, living over there, getting married over there, before coming back and spending a couple more years in the Navy. But there came a point where I realized I didn't want to be in the Navy anymore. Didn't want to be a part of the military. Sort of internal politics and things like that. I just kind of felt very stifling and frustrating. And so I came home to my wife one day. I was about 27 at this time. And I said, you know what? Why don't we just go to some country in the world and teach English while we kind of try and figure out life? And so I said that in the fall of 2009, and then in 2010, we were on January 2010, we were on a plane to Mexico. So within a couple of months, it was like bing, bing, bing. We both said, "Yep, let's do this." We didn't have kids at the time, and so we hopped on a plane to Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. And as we're flying down there, we kind of looked at each other and said, "Like, are we nuts? Like, what are we doing? We're just taking off on this life adventure. We don't really know what we're doing. We don't actually have a plan. But I guess let's just see how this goes."
Was your gut being your guy at the time?
Pardon me?
Your gut.
Um, to a degree, yes. I felt like it was a good choice to make, and looking back in hindsight, I think it was a phenomenal life experience that I would repeat 100 times out of 100, because traveling to foreign countries where I'm a visible minority, where I don't speak the language, where there's a different culture, all of that can be quite confronting at first to try and get used to, because we get quite comfortable with our own culture, our own identity, and things like that. To see that there's other human beings in other parts of the world that live differently, maybe they don't have the same privileges we do, they didn't grow up with the same degree of sort of wealth or first world comfort and so on. It really opened my eyes to the world at large, that there's like not other things like growing up in Canada or living in Canada. And so there was kind of a maturation process that took place just by virtue of being exposed to this.
Great. After your time of coming back and, you down at Port Vallarta teaching English and stuff like that, let's journey on to after 27
Mhm.
to, you look like, are you in your 30s, if you don't mind me guess?
Well, actually, I'm a ripe old 39, so I'm getting close to 40.
Okay, well, we'll go from 27 to 39.
Yeah,
And I know that's a big chunk here.
it is, and actually covers probably some of the most important experiences in my life that really, again, shape who I am, what I do, and where I am now in my life. Because it was age 29, living in South Africa at the period of time where I was nearly beaten to death, and that's an experience that nothing in life really prepares you for. Um, yeah, there really is nothing in life that prepares you to go through something like that. And so and I'm sort of glossing over the details of it, but ultimately, like it was traumatic, and going through trauma.
Do you, do you feel like sharing a little bit about your trauma? Do you feel comfortable?
Oh yeah,
That that
I would
that
say
helps our audience.
yeah, absolutely. And so um, really had nothing to do with me, but in at the time when it first happened, we were working at a nature reserve in Grahamstown in South Africa. That's a relatively small town in the Eastern Cape. It's actually quite a nice little place. But I was going back at night one time to the instructor's cabin at the nature reserve that we were working at. Everybody else was, probably a few hundred meters away in the dining hall. So I was quite a ways from everybody else. And And when I got back to the cabin, it was dark out, and I opened it. I should have noticed the door was ajar, but of course, in these sort of situations, we're not really, I was in a really good mood. We're really connecting with our students and things like that, loving the work that we were doing. I opened the door to my cabin, which was slightly ajar, and there was three men in there, sitting at the table in there, eating these hard biscuits. They're called rusks. They're eating that, drinking tea, and again, my brain didn't really register that something was off here, because I recognized one of the faces as one of the rangers on this nature reserve. And so it should have registered that, like, this is not the place that you're supposed to find a ranger breaking into your cabin and so on. And that's so, but there was a fourth guy out there that I didn't see. Obviously it was night, it's dark and so on. And he hit me over the head with a brick. And of course, when that happens, like, the brain is trying to register, like, what is going on? This doesn't feel real. Is this actually happening? And the others jumped up from the table and like attacked me. And so I got hit over the head a few more times, got knocked down, was getting kicked and beaten and stomped. And the ultimate objective was to beat me to death. It was, and they actually did that the night before. They unfortunately beat to death another white farmer. And so I managed to fight my way to my feet, and thankfully I'm fairly big. I'm 6'1", 235. Like, I'm a pretty big dude. I was able to fight my way to my feet. I was bloodied. I was concussed. I was, not really seeing straight or thinking straight, as well as just, this is a pretty traumatic thing to go through. But I managed to get over to the dining hall where my wife was with all of our students and so on. And we're all just laughing and eating dinner and having a grand old time. They had no idea that any of this was taking place. And, I come through the door, my face is covered in blood, and said I've been attacked. There's men out there. I don't know how many there are, and all of a sudden, of course, the place turned into kind of chaos and pandemonium as we, started barricading the doors, trying to get people to safe areas in the building, that kind of stuff. And these guys, they tried to break down the doors with shovels and things like that. Like, they were trying to break into the building. And so we were kind of trapped in there for about 45 minutes before the police showed up, because it took a while to drive from the actual police station in town out to where the nature reserve was, because it was a relatively isolated place. So ultimately the fallout from that was, when somebody like these men took something from me. They took away, like, they attacked me at night, they attacked me 4-on-1, they took me by surprise, and so on. So it's like they took my power away from me. And the response to that is, the initial trauma response really is to try to take it, or to want to take it back again. And so I grappled with, thoughts of rage, thoughts of taking vengeance, thoughts of attacking other people, and so on, to try and take retribution, or get retribution for what had been done to me. But a part of me, at least the logical part of my brain, said, this isn't who you are. It's not the type of person you are. And so there was a lot of internal conflict between, like, these feelings that felt very intrusive and invasive, and I didn't want them there. These feelings of rage and anger and wanting to hurt people and so on. These thoughts of wanting to do those things. And there's part of me that goes, this isn't who you are. You're not a violent person. So really sort of being in conflict there. The way that I dealt with that is eating. I became a binge eating food addict, essentially. I didn't have the tools to deal with the trauma, to deal with all these big emotions and so on. And so I ate food to change the channel in my head, to try not think about it. And that's what caused my weight to balloon significantly. That was, I would say, looking back now, it was probably one of the best things I could have gone through. I would not wish it on anyone. I would not ask for it again, but I wouldn't take that experience out of my past, because having to go through and do the work, having to come to terms with all of this, having to eventually come to terms with my binge eating and my food addiction and the weight, and the things I went through to try to lose weight and so on, it gave me a level of understanding into the genuine human struggle that is trying to lose weight. That previous to that, when I'd been an athlete, I would have just said, you're too lazy, you don't have discipline. The truth is a lot more complex than that. Like, human beings are a lot more complicated than that.
Exactly.
And it opened my eyes to have a much greater degree of empathy and compassion for the struggles that people go through in the process of trying to lose weight. And it's ultimately what led me to doing what I'm doing today as like I say I'm a weight loss nutritionist, but really I see nutrition as the cover story. It's the door, it's the ground floor of helping people understand their behaviors and helping them understand why they do what they do. Because I feel that if we can understand why we do what we do, then we're more able to treat ourselves with compassion and in the struggle of trying to better our health.
Well, as far as what you're talking about, I very much understand your journey as far as food addiction. Actually, my food addiction has been I'm 56,
Okay.
a lifelong struggle. And up until 15 years ago, 16 now, I was morbidly obese most of my life. And and I was given a choice to either buy a coffin or do something, and I did. And
so that's quite a way of putting it.
I lost 250 on my own, and my diabetes became so bad I had to have a gastric bypass 9 years ago.
Okay.
And so it was a medically necessary procedure as far as get my diabetes under control, and I lost another 120 pounds for a total of 360. But
wow.
But as far as binge eating and stuff like that, that is something I've dealt with all my life. I understand the struggles, the challenges, and the overcoming. It sounds like you overcome a lot and now are using your story to help folks. And I think that's a wonderful thing as far as that's concerned. And doing, basically, I call it turning your lemons into lemonade.
Absolutely.
And that's, I have to admit, that's basically what I've done here, is turn my lemons into lemonade. And I think we're two peas in a pod as far as that understanding. You've dealt with trauma. I've dealt with trauma. And, some of the stuff we work on and what we do to close Light for Life actually covers some of what you're talking about.
Which is wonderful. Yeah.
We will actually be sending you some books as a part of a freebie, virtual books from us to you to hopefully help you and maybe you with your clients. Can you give 3 takeaways that would be a big help for the audience?
Yeah, I would say, number 1, you're not alone in being human and struggling. Sometimes when we find ourselves comparing to what we see in the media, in social media, in digital media, that kind of thing, every human being has a struggle. And the one thing that gives us hope is that we're not alone. And when we feel like we're not alone, then it feels like it might be possible to change. Number 2, I would say compassionate awareness is the first step to change. So when we're struggling, there's many aspects of our behavior that are really trapped in their subconscious or unconscious behaviors. If we can make ourselves aware of these behaviors, and it's important to have compassion, because if we just are aware of these unhelpful behaviors we have, but we treat ourselves with negativity and unkindness or self-abuse or things like that, it doesn't actually help us. And that's why I say compassionate awareness is really a fundamental step to creating change. And number 3, the process of creating change, you're probably going to slip up and make mistakes. There's no real way around that, and that's okay, because those mistakes, when you connect with a coach, those mistakes can really be turned into a wonderful learning experience. We can take from that and take lessons and learn how to really apply that going forward. So when we encounter a similar situation in the future, we're now equipped to deal with that. So really, when we try to create change, it's not about the world conspires to make life perfect just so you can create this change. It's about learning how to navigate real life and the process of change simultaneously.
Basically, progress, not perfection.
That's my motto. You betcha.
I don't know where you'd learn that from, but there's a lot of areas where that applies in life, not just to weight loss, but to a lot of other things. And yes. I think it's the journey and the process of the journey. I think you would agree that that gets us from here to there. And it's not necessarily the ultimate goal, but the process. What I
would say is, weight loss is a doorway. It's not a destination.
Nope.
And so We also are very often in a hurry to get to some kind of destination point because we project our happiness into the future. But the truth is, we can be happy even in our present condition, even when it's difficult. It starts with that awareness piece. It starts with showing yourself compassion as you are, because if the mindset is my happiness lies somewhere in the future, it doesn't matter where you get to, you're always going to push your happiness into the future. And if you start with the understanding that it is possible in this present moment to experience happiness, and experiencing happiness does not mean that you won't want to change or better yourself. I think that's another myth that was out there, or I felt like if I showed myself kindness or if I showed myself compassion, that somehow it wouldn't change. But in fact, that was the very thing, compassion and kindness, that helped me to get into the headspace where I could create change in my life.
Good. Excellent. Thank you for coming to Claire's Delight for Life. It's about life. I hope you enjoyed our podcast as much as I did, and I hope you have a great day. I'd love to let you know about a new book coming out, and it's a great help for those who, and including you, to deal with life. It's called Overcoming Depression, Anxiety, PTSD, and Stress. Who couldn't use a book like this? And it's a great program. And the book and audio are going to be made available on Audible and Amazon. We also have we are on all the social platforms, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, and TikTok, and just about anything else you can think of. With all that being said, we also have some other wonderful books that you can get on Amazon and Audible and on our website too, which is declaresdelightforlife.com. Again, that's declaresdelightforlife.com. And those books are Clutter to Declutter. And another one is 28 Days to Declutter Your Mind. The other one is Secrets to Declutter Your Mind Now. These were written with lots of love and experience, these books, to really help you on your journey in life, because I know, having gone through so much in my life, these are written from the heart to see that you too can succeed despite your situations. And I just want you guys to know that we do have a 180-day guarantee that if any of these don't work for you, you can just email us or at support@declaresdelightforlife.com, and we will refund your money with no questions asked, because we believe that a no questions asked guarantee is the best way to have a great relationship with you. And with that said, you know what? I hope you enjoyed this episode of Declares Delight for Life. It's about life, sharing your experience, strength, and hope.